I'm Gene, and this is Perfect Flow. I'm a New Zealand-based athlete and coach focused on optimizing performance, health, and well-being. I have a professional background in biomedical engineering, but I've chosen to follow my more immediate passions of running, endurance, adventure, movement, nutrition, science, lifestyle, community, psychology, and personal growth. My mission is to connect with bright minds and extract the information I need to live a life that makes sense and feels good, and share those conversations right here. Apart from your favorite podcast app, the best places to follow my work are at perfectflow.nz, genebeveridge.nz, and Perfect Flow on Facebook. Enjoy the show. What's up, guys? I made an intro. Do you like it? Did I try too hard? It was fun. We'll probably keep that intro in for a little while, and if people really like it, then we'll keep it forever. But I'm likely to change my tastes at some stage, so we'll see. Quick update from me. Training's going good. Still focusing on base, really, building that mileage, getting up to 10 hours a week of all activities, including strength and maintenance stuff. Body's feeling good. Had a little blip when I overcooked week 4. This is the start of week 6 now, and feeling pretty good now. Week 5 went really well, and including the yoga. It's just such a staple now. I've maintained that range of motion through my hips that has seen my knees reach a new level of comfort. My patella tracking issues are just gone, nowhere to be seen, and that's pretty cool. That we kind of knew that it was something to do with hip flexor tension, because that's how we could release it, but to realize that I just needed to find some movements in yoga that had a better stretch. So I'm not quite sure what that better stretch was. Was it targeting slightly different muscles? Was it pushing into the range a little bit more? I'm not sure, but it's something I couldn't get at with the static stretching that I did so consistently for years, and to find that a quick few weeks in yoga was enough to unwind that issue is a massive relief. And by the same token, my hamstrings have the hamstring tendonitis that I've suffered for years has also cleared up, and the yoga I've been doing has been targeting that, and that my hamstring tendons often sore the day after yoga. So I know they're under tension when I'm doing these exercises. I can feel they're under tension in the moment, and it seems to be working. Once you let them settle down after a day, there seems to be less tension that is aggravating the tendonitis in those tendons. So I'm thrilled to be able to report that with a higher level of confidence than I could a few weeks ago. So enough of an update. On to today's podcast. Today I'm sharing a podcast I recorded a little while ago with a trail runner who I've known for a little while by the name of Jason Reid. I expect many of you have seen him on social media before, and especially in 2018, where he really came into the spotlight when he won the 2018 AMP New Zealand People's Choice Scholarship for his charity Running on the Spectrum. This is a charity that he set up to help people with autism, and he uses running for its mental and physical benefits, and that is of particular relevance to people with autism, and it was great to hear about the details with that in the podcast. He runs the fundraiser every year in the month of April, I recall, called the Greatest Virtual Run, and you can find more about that at greatestvirtualrunnz.com. And it's got information about how you can join in, how you can raise funds, and how to get involved, because it's not just a one-off. You kind of do running on your own accord and join it into the total and share the event with others. So it's great that he's got this far, and I think the funding that he got put towards the charity was very well deserved. And I really do believe that the community that Jason has built really couldn't have asked for a greater ambassador. He holds himself really, really well, and I think the confidence with which he talks about these topics must be really inspiring for families and individuals who have autism, and just seeing that not only can people with autism get by, but they really can thrive. This is a topic and a community that I'm pretty new to, and I don't really have that many connections into the community. So if you're listening to this and you do have you know people or your friends, family who are connected with the community, that is a autism community, it would be really grateful if you could share this. I think there's so much good advice here. It would be a waste if it just got distributed in the running community, which is where I have the strongest connections. So if you do know someone, just flick them a link, whether it's from my website or the podcast on whatever podcast app you use, or on Facebook, of course. You can find it at Perfect Flow on Facebook. That would be really great to get the message out about all the great work Jason has done. So thank you for bearing through the intro, and I bring you Jason Reid. Hi Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
It's been interesting. You jumped onto a lot of people's radars last year when you were working towards your scholarship, which you eventually won, the AMP New Zealand People's Choice Scholarship. I think that's when you caught a lot of people's attention. I've had obviously a massive interest in running, but also a personal interest in kind of things that affect the mind, and depression and autism have definitely been things that I've been very interested in. So you seem like the right person to talk to, because you're crossing two things that I'm definitely interested in. So I'm keen to hear a little bit more about your background, and we'll just bring the listeners up to speed with where you're at now. So if you could share a little bit on your background as a person, that would be really good, I think.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I started the charity Running with the Spectrum a couple of years ago. What we primarily do is try and get kids with autism. People may have heard the name Asperger's, but that name is slowly going out of the dictionary. That's
okay. So autism spectrum disorder is the term that's been preferred.
Yep. So I was diagnosed myself with Asperger's, but now I just say autism. That's the word now. So I was diagnosed in my 40s. Initially I didn't really speak a lot about it. It was just kept in family. My son was also diagnosed, and eventually, I wanted to speak out. I guess I was doing a teaching degree and working with a lot of kids on the spectrum. So I wanted to, there was no one really speaking out, no one saying much. So I thought, well, I guess it's got to be me. So I guess I used my running as a window to get into, being able to speak about autism. It worked in well with schools. So I started the charity probably 2 years ago, and I go around when I have time, and I do running at schools. I'm available to speak. I also donate running shoes, new running shoes, do fundraising to help kids get into running. They have a basic plan, just depending on whether a movement program, I guess, would be the best term for it. So that's been underway. It's become very, very a big part of my life in the last year, I guess. I started my own journey with running started when I had severe asthma as a child. So I couldn't run at all. I was in and out of hospitals, and my asthma is still very bad. But when I was about 15 or 16, it was the first time I ran 400 metres around an oval. I hadn't been able to run in any cross-country runs or anything up until then, and slowly sort of just built up. I thought, I always thought running was something you could do or you couldn't. But at that young age, I found if I did a bit of training, I could. It helped not only my asthma, but also helped me get a bit better. And I think by 17, a couple of years later, I was running half marathons and marathons, and it kind of kicked on from there. I guess I'm now 51, and I had a few decades break, and probably from my early 20s and until my 40s, I had a break from running and back into it now. And just with the charity, it's just been a great way for my running and for the school kids just to be able to learn a bit more about autism. Running is a great way for children on the autism, primarily emotionally. It's great for the mind, as probably every runner knows, but especially for people on the autism who quite often have a very cluttered mind, full of a lot of things, and running and movement is just fantastic for getting out. So I've kind of incorporated it into a lot of programs that I've worked with and kids I've worked with at schools. I start off in the morning and say, hey, maybe assembly's not the best thing for these kids. Maybe we can go for a couple of laps of the oval instead of doing assembly, and it's really good. After that, they can go straight into classwork and do their work, and their mind's a bit more at ease.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Movement is such a fundamental part of being a human, and it's quite interesting that often for us to pay attention to it, we need to see a group of people who are struggling in some way, and then we can see how much value it adds to them before we realize just how much value it adds to everyone. So I'm really interested in this concept of the betterment of well people. Yep. So not only is exercise good for people with autism and depression as well, it's good for everyone, and for some reason it takes a special group of people for us to pay attention to it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been very successful. I guess movement is fantastic, and I guess even over the last number of years, a lot of children don't probably get enough exercise. So it's great to get around some schools and get all children into sort of outdoors. And a lot of the children that I'm seeing or work with or donating shoes to, they haven't primarily been in running. They haven't been runners before, but amazing feedback. Lots of kids are now into running and using movement, and it's been great for families. I try and incorporate it in with their family. We're not about trying to produce top line runners, although having said that, there have been a couple of kids who have won events and so forth at school cross countries, and even in their category at the New Zealand New Zealand Championships. Cool. And overseas there's some big names. Mikey Brannigan, who has quite severe autism. He's run a sub 4-minute mile, so probably the most well known of the autism runners. But it's just primarily about mental health and running. It's just been fantastic for kids on the spectrum who have very busy minds and move a lot also. The kids often don't fit into a rugby or a sports team environment.
Right. We can talk a little bit more about what features tend to be part of the autism catalogue. But there's I think a common theme is the social interactions. So do you see a tendency towards solo sports, individual sports as being a preference?
Yeah, there's been studies in America and elsewhere over the last few years, and and running does keep popping up. Running and swimming as being really good sports for people with autism. Yeah, primarily a lot of team sports, the rules can be quite difficult to follow. They might not, they have to rely on other people have to rely on them, so it can be quite difficult. It's also, and a lot of children on the spectrum just, I guess, can gravitate, towards sports, solo sports. So, running has been ideal. Often the studies mention swimming and running as the two sports. Obviously there will be there's kids out there with autism that play rugby, etc. But there's just there has just been some great research on the benefits of running with these children. So yeah, it's just a sport they gravitate towards, especially the movement side of it. And I mean, I'm a perfect example. I find it hard to stay still, I think, on my feet. Literally, I walk around during the day, and that's where I concentrate better rather than just sitting in a chair.
Interesting.
So just different ways of people thinking.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So what are the most common differences between someone who has autism spectrum disorder compared to the average person? And maybe you can talk a little bit about how it appears as a developmental disorder. We'll try not to go too medical, but what are the practical and observable features of this group?
I guess I like to think almost everybody has a form of autism. There's a number of tests and so forth, but everyone would have some of the attributes. It's just
I reckon I would probably score in some ways. I've just had a look, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's
so there's a lot
situations
of
that I
if
can
you look at
see.
the tests, you think, oh gee, that could be me, and everybody ticks a few boxes. People with autism probably just tick nearly all of the boxes. There's things from early from an early age. They can be, people with autism might be fixated on certain things. They might be, things like hobbies. Probably everyone knows, say, a child that, loves dinosaurs and knows everything about dinosaurs. But I guess a child with autism would go even deeper than that, and go right through into adult type discussions and into really detail with their specialist subjects, so they can get fixated on something.
Right, so they would appear far ahead of their age.
Yeah. That's one of the big things. There can be social social skills where they might prefer to be by themselves. Again, a lot of people prefer to be by themselves, but they may not have a lot of friendships, or they're just unsure of how to make friendships, is probably more accurate. A lot of children may prefer to have their topics speak with adults rather than children from an early age. They prefer to probably talk on and on and on about the one subject. So I guess there's a lot of the thing is with the spectrum, it's such a wide spectrum. There's people that everyone would know, almost someone on the spectrum, but they may not be diagnosed. There's people in the fields of science and maths, and doing a lot of research that they may not be diagnosed, but I've attended adult autism meetings and they're there. There's also at the other end of the spectrum, there's people that may be non-verbal, who may not be able to. They may struggle a lot in life. So it's just such a wide spectrum. And I guess I focus on the children I work with is what they can do rather than what they can't do. It's really just a different way. I like to just explain it in a few words and saying it's just a little, it's a different way of thinking. That's all. It's not a wrong way or a right way, and to me, it's not really even a disability of any sort. It can be a lot of positives, and I guess I emphasise those positives.
Yeah, I think what one guy that brought a lot of attention. I don't know if you know Robbie. I forget his last name, from Hawke's Bay. I know him through a common connection in orienteering.
Right.
It managed to get onto the news some years ago.
Yeah.
Which was quite cool to see.
Yeah.
Someone who had fairly large impairments in certain areas, but could really communicate a lot of the ideas and his experience to the public. And he describes autism for him as a diffability, which I thought was an interesting way. Because we're all familiar with the special needs kind of class as you come through schools, and you kind of group them all together as people who need extra help. But to realize that there's some areas that they're very skilled in, and a diffability as opposed to a disability could be a better way to look at it. I found that quite insightful.
Yeah, and I guess I see it the same way. I mean, I don't. There's, I guess, in the last 10 years or so, a lot more people are getting diagnosed. So, excuse me, the population, I guess, see all these people getting diagnosed and thinking, wow, is there a lot more people with autism than there used to be? Well, it's just that they're getting there's more,
right.
they're getting there's no more people than there used to be 40 or 50 years ago. It's just that there's more diagnosis. It's just more common with everything. That's so that's the reason why. I mean, I think the figures are never exact, but it could be around. There's figures they say around 1 in 60 people. But having said that, there's figures some people have said closer to 1 in 20, 1 in 30, and upwards to 1 in 80. It just hasn't. It's really hard to say because there's so many undiagnosed.
Yep. And with the spectrum,
in schools, I sometimes I could know a child is on the spectrum after working them for a while, but they may not be diagnosed. They may just be a member of that class.
With a spectrum disorder, is there also a problem about where you draw the line? Because ultimately, this has been diagnosed by some kind of clinically validated study, some standardized test, I assume. A line has to be drawn in the sand somewhere.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
I don't know if it's moved. I guess it depends on who's doing the diagnosis. It's not just a test where you tick a box and they go, yes, that's a diagnosis. It's a lot of discussion, I guess, with parents, with young children. There'd be reports done and discussions with the child, and there's common things they might say. One of the things is someone with autism may not look people in the eye. I mean, personally, myself, I have no problem with that, and a lot of people I know have no problem on the spectrum have no problem with that. But that's one of the the marking points. But so it goes through discussion. I don't know if it's changed at all. There would be more specialists in the field. Obviously, there'd be more specialists than there were 2 years ago, than 5 years ago, than 10 years ago. So, and there's a lot more, help around. So, for that sort of thing. But as far as diagnosis, there's just a lot more children being diagnosed, being recognised, and that would be the same with a lot of other things like ADHD, etc.
Cool. And one other question about the kind of medical side. Is there some sensory changes that occur throughout development with the way we feel, with our senses interact with the world around us? With autism, are there some changes there?
I guess, everyone's different. Everyone has, a lot of people with autism have a lot of sensory difficulties. That might be to light or to sound. It could be even, again, all the senses really. And it depends on the individual. I guess that's one of the with early development, that's something that's definitely always brought up as sensory elements. But again, there's people who may not have any sensory difficulties, any sensory differences than anyone else. So it is a bit of a minefield. With all this, I mean, I know myself as far as sensory. If I'm in, say, the only thing I have with sensory is if I'm in I'm fine in small groups. So if I'm in large, say a big party with 100 people, after maybe half an hour or an hour, I might have to just go outside for a minute or two, clear my head, and then come back in. It's fine, but generally, it's not a problem for me personally. But yeah, a lot of people have with autism have problems with like I helped a runner last year at Tarawera who wasn't able to really go through the process of registration because as you can imagine, there were 1,000 people in a couple of small tiny rooms, weighed and everything. So I was able to take him up to the front and get it all done and get him sort of in and out of there within 10 minutes. And yeah, he ran the 100k, and he said afterwards the hardest bit of the whole weekend was that registration. Being in that 10 minutes was the hardest thing. And so there's a lot of that sensory difficulty, and it's just the sudden change also of going from, say, silence to a busy classroom can be very hard. Like a child might get dropped off at school, they've had a very calm morning, they've been with their parents in the car, and then all of a sudden they get out of the car and there's hundreds of kids just everywhere and teachers and people all talking, and it's too much for the mind. So that's why a boy I was working with a couple of years ago, I just used to get him at the start of the day, and we'd run and walk a few laps right from the start, and then everyone would be in class settled before we actually went back into the classroom. So we might start, we were getting into the classroom sort of 10 minutes after everyone else, but by that stage it was kind of silence, so it was quite a good, nice way to start the day. So that's something I encourage other teachers and parents to try and get their students to their schools to try and implement as well.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to say that you're including the wider school population in some of that stuff. How much can the rest of us learn? Because because I think this example is so good, because it is a spectrum disorder, and the black and white diagnosis often takes precedence with society. But I think we should be asking everyone, what are our needs as an individual, and what's the best start to the day for everyone? And yeah, I think there's a bit to learn there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, children are great. Children accept. This day there's so much discussion around. So, it's great for kids. Are able to accept anyone, and that's what I'm always about, inclusiveness and about including children, whatever their abilities, in mainstream schools and in mainstream sports. And I take children into the school cross country, and I might run with them if they're unable to run unsupported. And it's great just to be out there and doing their stuff. And I'm really, I guess the thing I'm most for is inclusiveness for everybody, not just kids with autism, but just everyone. That to be included and to treat everyone well, and that's got to start from the parenting, really, to give those skills to the kids. Schools have been great. with anyone, with some of the children I've worked with, have been fantastic with getting them into the environment and settling them. And there's, I guess, in New Zealand, there's still a big need for training around autism for teachers, teacher aides. When you do, I guess, similar to other degrees, when you do, say, a teaching degree, you may just do a very small, very tiny week or something on autism. So teachers get, beginner teachers may get thrown into a classroom with a couple of autistic children, and they may not know how to deal with it because they just haven't got the knowledge. Schools obviously have a lot of experienced teachers, and they would probably have experienced teachers in that role, but there's just a great need for more knowledge and more training, and it's great that Autism New Zealand's getting around schools as well, and offering training. I love using sport as an example in running. And quite often, the children with autism will run around when I do. I sometimes do. I'll run the school day, and I might run from 9 till 3 around the school oval.
Mm-hmm.
People might say, how can you run all day around the school oval? But for me, I prefer. I guess this is another little part of autism for me. I prefer familiar running routes, and I'll often just run my same route again and again and again, and that's good for me. Sometimes the first time I do a race that I've never done before, I might find it not so much stressful, but due to it being unfamiliar, it can just put a few uncertainties into my head. If I've already run the route, then I know every position, every marker, etc. So running around a school oval is fine for me. I don't need anywhere different, and a lot of the kids will run around and from the school, and quite often I'll get the children with autism will run, and they may be a lot slower than the other children, but they have almost like an inner determination that they will keep going around and around. And last year, one boy with autism, 11 or 12, he did about 70 or 80 laps. Other kids might sprint off and do 5 really fast, but then they'd have to stop. But he just went at one pace, and they just go at their own pace, and he would just go round and round, and he ended up running more than anyone else. So that was fantastic. But he and I think that's again, that's something with autism, is often there's a task, and we will see it through to the end in our own way. It's just like you might go to work at 8 in the morning and you finish at 4. You don't really just decide halfway through the day, well, I'm just going to go home now because I've had enough. And I think quite often with running, children with autism or people with autism will see the end, and they'll think, well, I've just start here and I finish there, and that's just the way. It sounds very simple. That's just the way the mindset is. You don't just decide after halfway you've sort of had enough. And but there are some, there's some great long distance ultra marathoners in New Zealand with autism, running milers and stuff. And I'm sure they are succeeding because of autism, because they have that. There's somebody I know who has run a few milers, 100 milers, and he could only started running a couple of years ago, and he's just he can do it because he can just he just tells, I know everybody who runs that distance must be incredibly strong mentally, but he can just start and he just goes at his pace and he'll get to the finish, and he's fantastic. And I guess that's autism in a nutshell. Is people can just achieve, so many people with autism have achieved amazing careers because they have such a passion for what they're doing.
Yeah, and the lesson is for everyone is to identify your strengths and also identify your weaknesses, and make sure you've chosen a route through them that gets the most out of the body and the mind that you didn't necessarily choose, but you've got now. You have to make the most of it. So that's great to hear people finding their niche and really succeeding.
Yeah.
It's really cool. I wanted to ask more about the outdoors. I had a hunch that getting autistic people in the outdoors, because it's possibly there's just less people, less emphasis on social interaction, that could be a huge benefit. I was kind of interested to then hear that you might have at least for yourself, a counterpoint to that sense of unfamiliarity. Where do other people with autism sit with regards to exploring the outdoors?
People often I say to parents, because parents might say, "Oh, my child's not into running, or they hate running, or something," and that's fine. A lot of children do, obviously, but they may say, "Oh," and I say, "Do they like bushwalking, or do they like going to the beach or something?" They go, "Oh, yeah, they love that." And so that's what that's the point of movement. Is I encourage families to go outdoors. Children with autism love exploring, and if you take them, it doesn't matter if it doesn't have to be the best beach or the best park or the best trail. It just has to be somewhere, and they might stop and start a lot and stop and look at certain things on the way for a long time. But it's a fantastic way to get kids outdoors, and bushwalking and doing it as a family is fantastic for children with autism. Often they may have interest as well in things in the bush, whether it be insects or animals or butterflies or plants. So quite often they'll get fixated on those specialties, and it may be a long walk where they stop and start a lot, and because they want to explore everything. But it's just a fantastic way to start a love of the outdoors.
That's really interesting.
I always encourage families to maybe plan. Children with autism primarily love a bit of notice, so it's not something you may just say, quick, let's all get in the car right now and go for a bushwalk. But if you said, this weekend we're going here, we're having a picnic and we're going to walk for half an hour, then that will be placed in their mind. They'll then be able to know that's coming up, and a fantastic way to get to the outdoors. And if you haven't got a forest nearby or a trail, you can just beach it, anywhere outdoors. So it's just a great way to move around. And there's numerous examples. Like I said earlier, children love to move. And children with autism quite often they would prefer standing up. I know myself. I prefer standing up than sitting down anywhere. And often when I'm at someone's house or at a dinner party, people say, "Oh, sit down," and I have to remind myself that it's one of those social niceties. You may have to sit down, whereas I'm just more comfortable standing up, walking around. So also, I guess it's good training being on your feet all day too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So what kind of advice do you have for parents who might have younger kids who maybe they're starting to notice anything, or even just people who exhibit some features that might place them near that borderline? From experience here, what's your advice?
I guess as parents, you've got to do everything you can for your child. So that means if they've been diagnosed, you would be, you have to be involved with the school, and individual education plan. You would, you have to let the school know every little bit of information you have about your child is valuable for the school and the teachers. Try and have a fantastic relationship with your child's teacher. teachers out there do a fantastic, wonderful job, and
Yeah.
and they will look after your child. If your child may be exhibiting and you're unsure and you go, oh, I don't know, let's just hold off for a while. You can, these days, obviously everyone Googles everything and gets information from the internet. You can go and get a diagnosis, go and speak to someone, start the process. It may be a bit of a mourning process when a child initially gets diagnosed, because of the lack of knowledge. You think, oh no, this will affect their whole life. It's not a it's not a terrible sentence to receive. There's fantastic positives with autism. There's more information out there than's ever been out there, and it's they just have to be there for their child. You just have to put other things on hold, and that's just what parents do for their children. They're always there. So you just seek help where it's needed, and if you think your child might be on the spectrum, then just make an appointment. Don't wait 2 years, and get help from them now. And like I said, the spectrum's very, very, very wide indeed, which makes it, I guess, a little bit different than it's such a wide spectrum. So
Yeah, and in the short term, that can seem.
And that's depending on where you are in that line. There's, depending on what sort of help you may need or where you can go.
Yeah, that's right. Can be very different, and to have something like a name like autism, where you've often heard about people who really struggle and can be harmful to themselves even, that kind of perhaps stereotypes a little bit the other end of the spectrum, where people are often highly functional and very talented in certain areas, so that the details really matter. And I'm quite hopeful that the more we zoom in on the spectrum and the more details we discover about these individuals, the more that line will blur, actually. And I'm really hopeful that the conversation then spreads just to normal people, and we begin to discuss with every teacher what are my needs as an individual. That's as opposed to it's only people with a diagnosis that have special needs. I don't think that's true at all. I think we all have unique needs, and a lot of us have the same needs, so we can all be kind of knocked off together. But there are definitely people who won't be on a particular spectrum of special needs, and that conversation needs to be open to everyone. But we'll definitely get there first with the people that need the most help, right? And then as we progress as a society, hopefully we'll be able to spread that treatment to everyone.
And I guess the learning style of everyone is different. There's not just there's how one style suits all style of learning. Often children with autism will have a different, may have a different style of learning or way, and I know that's the same with me. I like to follow I like to follow a recipe, almost a way. A recipe style of learning is best for me. Whereas other people, someone can say, "Hey, this is what you do," and they'll be able to do that straight away. So there's so many different styles of learning out there, and it's good to know what everyone's own style of learning is and your child's best way of learning. I know in my own school life, I found learning with a teacher, learning was obviously different years ago at schools, but I found it very difficult sitting in a desk looking at a teacher, and they would say blah blah blah, but if it's written down in front of me, I was fine with stuff, what to do. So cool. Just different styles. So I guess that's
What can we do if we've perhaps got people peers that we associate with, and they might be placed somewhere on the spectrum? Are there any tips to how to approach that with them? And I think it's a lot of people perhaps have a defensive reaction to it. But I think if you understand the spectrum, you realize there's nothing to be that defensive about if you're just kind of functional and unsure. How do you approach that with people?
I would say people with autism generally love talking. They may talk your ear off about
Right.
their subject. You just have to find out what they like, and they'll, if you listen to them, they'll be your friend for life. Generally, I guess sometimes people with autism may not understand the social niceties of when to stop talking and when to start listening and whose turn it is to speak. Those kind of things which you may take, people it's just a natural for most people.
It's intuitive, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I struggle with that too, and a lot of people with autism struggle with that the social niceties, I guess, and they may not understand certain questions, like say a simple question like, "Oh, hi, how are you today?" The answer "good," we all say, "Oh, good," or something, and that doesn't really make sense for a person with autism, saying, it's just, questions like that do not make sense unless, they prefer more a direct question like a yes or a no would be better, like, are you feeling happy today? Yes or no,
okay.
rather than how are you going today? They don't know really what, I even struggle with that. I think, well, what's the correct answer? Doesn't, unless I feel like giving a detailed answer, so I guess those tiny little things, if people can just understand sometimes that people with autism, it may just be a little different, and it's both sides working together.
If someone's on that close to the line, close to the edge of the currently diagnosed autism spectrum disorder, is there any urgency for them to get a diagnosis, or is just knowing their own traits and being open about that to their peers sufficient?
Yeah, I think knowing yourself, if you can know and understand yourself and your own strengths and weaknesses, and that goes for everyone, that's enough. You don't need to have a diagnosis to say, hey, I've got autism. I mean, if you're functioning perfectly fine in society, you don't need a diagnosis to say, just to say anything, unless you need assistance. There's no real need, and there would be probably as many people, or if not more people, without a diagnosis than with a diagnosis. But they don't need, like, people who often say to me, oh, my dad's on the spectrum, he's not diagnosed, but we all know he is. And I hear that a lot. But you don't need the diagnosis unless you need assistance somewhere. Like a lot of children are getting diagnosed because they need the assistance from schools, and so forth. But if you're an adult, you may not need to get a diagnosis unless you require that extra assistance. But the main thing is if people know their strengths and weaknesses, and if you know what your weaknesses are, and you can not put your, as long as you're comfortable where you're at. That's the same for everyone, as long as you're. I was sort of, I didn't want to speak out or say anything because I thought, oh, people might think, this or that, because I didn't really have an understanding. But I realised I was just exactly the same person that I've always been. So, it doesn't worry me at all to tell people if it comes up.
Yeah, I think that's really important for people to hear.
Yeah.
What's next for the charity?
So I'm always looking for schools to go and to give shoes to, and get, help them out. I love getting around, the schools and talking to children. I say to children, I'm on the autism spectrum myself, and kids see me out running, and kids see you out doing everything else, and then they think, oh, so it's it's very positive experience for them because they don't see any different. they would see me the same as any of their other teachers, I guess. So it would be we're just trying to get as many children with autism into running and movement, giving shoes to them, getting out to schools when I can. So it's been a very busy sort of last 6 months. It was fantastic to be recognised as and voted the People's Choice winner.
Yeah,
I got to
that was very cool.
Yeah, it was, and people probably got sick of seeing me online because begging for votes, but it was fantastic, and I was able to attend the World Autism Conference in Houston. That was fantastic, and I've been invited to speak at the Asia Pacific Autism Conference on running on the spectrum, about running and autism. So
wow, that's going to be quite inspiring, I think.
Mid-year, so yeah, and so that would be fantastic to do that as well.
Great, great.
Yeah.
So, where can people find you? Where's the best place to get more information on the charity?
I guess the website is greatestvirtualrunnz.com, and they can always contact me through there. We run the Greatest Virtual Run every April. This is the 3rd year, and that's the sort of the big fundraiser for the year. It's a run, walk, where people can get involved in the month of April, and they can choose a distance they want to run or walk over that month, or they can even just do it over a weekend. And great fundraiser for us. People receive a medal, and this year there's we've been lucky enough, we've got a trip to the Gold Coast for a spot prize for the Gold Coast Marathon.
Oh, so get involved.
That'd be a nice prize for someone. So it'd be great if people listening, they can pop on the website and join up. They can also contact, email through if they've got any questions about autism. I'm always available. They're welcome to contact me via the website or the Facebook page. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll put some links to the website and your Facebook page. And just to clarify, the run, so the way that works is people just do their run and upload to the internet, and the distance gets summed up to your own personal account.
Basically, even more simpler than that. It's they can choose a distance over April. You can do 50k, 100k, 150k, or 300k over the month of April. Or they can choose one of the runs. We have a weekend on the 3rd week of April where you can do solo runs like a 5k or 10k half marathon. You can just tell us what distance you want to do, and you just solo track it yourself. A lot of people don't have Strava or any kind of smartwatch, so you can just keep your details on pen and paper, and it's just an honesty policy. So if you're not internet savvy or anything, that's fine. Cool. It's a virtual run, so you can run and walk it throughout, wherever you live. And we've got a lot of people meeting up in some of the main cities on one day for the event. But a lot of families are involved. It's great for families, great to get your kids out, your whole family out running and walking over April. If you want to get a few Ks in your legs, then it's a fantastic challenge. Keep you motivated for the whole month. And you never know that people might win. Someone's going to win a trip for 2 to the Gold Coast. So fares, accommodation.
It's a big win-win, it seems.
Yeah. So looking forward to that, and personally, where I'm sort of, I'll do a few runs myself this year, and wherever I run myself, I like to take a whole lot of shoes around to the schools or where I'm running. So I'm doing an event, and I'm going down to Cromwell and Queenstown. So when I'm down there, I'll take a whole lot of shoes down as well. So wherever I'm travelling, I take shoes. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Really lowering the barriers to people getting involved in the fundraising, and the barriers to people with autism to improving their well-being.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, Jason.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. And I'd just like to thank also, last chance to thank everybody in the over the last couple of years that's either supported one of my virtual run events, or in any way, donated to people in the running community have been fantastic. They've donated secondhand shoes, new shoes, which I'm able to use for kids. So yeah, it's just been fantastic, the support that I've received.
Yeah, that's great. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jason.
Okay, thanks a lot.
If you're enjoying the Perfect Flow podcast and want more value from it in the future, there are some ways you can support it. The first is to rate or leave a positive review on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or other platforms where it's available. The second is to share this podcast or specific episodes on social media or with friends. The third is to get involved more directly through the Perfect Flow page on Facebook, where I'm trying to construct a more interactive community. I want Perfect Flow to belong to the listeners, and if you tell me more about the topics you are most interested in, or even specific guests, I'll do my best to make it happen. This is your opportunity to be part of something that answers your questions and adds value to your life. Another good reason to follow Perfect Flow on Facebook is that I post links to new episodes, blogs, and anything I find useful to this page. It's a great way to follow my training, racing, and learning. Another great way to stay engaged is to subscribe to beveridge.nz. This way you will get podcasts and blogs emailed to you, avoiding the clutter of Facebook. I don't know where this project will take us, but the reception so far has been positive. Who knows where we might be in a few years.